Welcome to Tap In Tuesday. I am reconstructing kind of this podcast, Leia on the Line. It's still going to be Leia on the Line, but instead of everything just being me monologuing and that's all Leia on the Line, I'm going to start splitting up these episodes into 3 different categories. So we're going to have this episode that I've been doing where I'm monologuing is going to be called Tap In Tuesday. So it's going to be just me talking about my life experiences a little more informally and opinions on women's basketball and ways that I'm kind of thinking about things that are currently shaping the game. The second type of episode is going to be called Between the Lines, and that is a podcast that I've yet to shoot. The first one will air next week, and that'll be me co-hosting with another journalist who's working in the industry, a fellow Northwestern alum who loves basketball and is excited to talk about women's basketball. And the last type of episode that I'm going to show here on Leia on the Line is called On the Line, the Sit Down. So this is going to be an interview style episode podcast where I am interviewing people that are relevant to either women's basketball, sports, or film, the film industry, documentary industry, and hopefully they have some intersection within that. So yeah, these are the 3 new sections that this podcast, Leia on the Line, is going to be split into. This one is the most informal one, kind of where you're just going to hear some of my thoughts, experiences, from both a basketball perspective and a filmmaking perspective. So I'm going to kind of first give you an overview of what we're going to be talking about today, and then we'll kind of jump right in. To get started today, we're going to talk about a little bit of Project B. Secondly, why I think it is important to discuss women's basketball kind of as a different sport in a way than men's basketball. How to finance your first film, how I financed my first film, and some tips for playing basketball in college. Maybe you're a high school student, maybe you're a middle school basketball player, and you want to play basketball in college and bring your game to the next level. What are some ways that you can make that a more likely outcome for yourself? I played Division I basketball at Northwestern University for all 4 years of my undergrad. So yeah, I feel like my life now is kind of, it's just, everything is just a trickle effect. So, there's definitely relationships that I had at Northwestern and certain things that I learned there that influence everything that I do today. So it's a very important decision where you go to school, why you go, what you're doing there. And so I'm going to give you some insight into what influenced my decision and what you might want to consider when you're preparing to make your decision or put yourself in the best place to have as many choices as possible. That's essentially what you want to do. So here's my Northwestern Mom Cup. And let's get into the first subject. So Project B. Project B has just created so much controversy recently online. And I mean, I'm hearing perspectives about the political influence that it has, being Saudi Arabian backed. I'm hearing, sides of, well, the WNBA has existed for so long, and they haven't been paid, so how is this any different than WNBA players going to play in Turkey and going to play in South America and all those things for years and years and years? How is this any different? There's the perspective of the WNBA has been growing for so long, for the past, 25 plus years, and so why invest in something else right now when the WNBA is at such a pivotal moment? Why leave that? And there's everything in between. Project B is essentially a league that WNBA players can choose to play in the off season. They want 66 players. The league will start in November, I believe, and it'll end around April. And so the teams will be in Europe Asia, South America, and we don't know exactly where yet. We don't exactly, honestly, know a ton of details about where this money is going to come from, but all we know is that Project B has a lot of money. The minimum starting salary for Project B is, for any player, is $2 million. That's what they're proposing. I mean, the minimum starting salary of the WNBA is, I believe, $80,000. The cap in the WNBA is $252,000. So, if they're giving a minimum starting salary of $2 million, that's at least what they're saying. That hasn't happened yet, but that's what they're projecting, It's like, why wouldn't someone take that? And a few players have spoken out and said that. Nneka's signed, Alyssa Thomas is signed. These are big-time players. Nneka's the president of the WNBPA, the Players Union. So, believe that this is going to grow into something bigger than what it is right now. And, it's going to rival the WNBA in a sense. And so I think in terms of, how to think about this and how to process if this is a good or bad thing, I think it's hard to really say, is it black or white? Is it all good, all bad? My stance, as probably you'll learn, a lot of my stances are in the gray area. I don't necessarily think that it would be fair to say this is all good 100%, go for it, or that it's all bad and it's horrible and going to do horrible things for the WNBA. I don't think either of those things. I think it exists in the middle. The main headlines are saying that the downfall of this league, of Project B, is that it is backed by Saudi Arabia in terms of who's funding it. And the big controversy tied to this is Saudi Arabia has been historically had a big influence on oppression that people in the Middle East have faced, especially women and children. So there's that perspective. Front Office Sports did come out with an article a little bit ago that stated exactly where this money was coming from, what exactly is Saudi Arabia funding. Project B is not owned at all by any part of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is funding their events partnership. So they don't get a cut of the ownership. They don't own a percentage of Project B. But, they are funding this league in a sense in terms of its events and partnerships and things like that. This Saudi Arabian company that's doing this has also done this for several other leagues. Nothing is big. Golf and I can't remember the other ones, boxing. So, I've kind of heard that narrative going around in saying that, well, what are we supposed to do? Like, we're not making enough here. This country's offering us this. They have a history, a track record of not being ethical to their people. But, what else are we to do? Women have been playing overseas ever since, the creation of professional women's basketball. So why not do it again? It's simply another place, another way to access money in terms of basketball. And so it's a crazy concept. Like these things, it's just kind of crazy to think about, like how intertwined right now politics are with women's basketball. And, we're talking about a league, but no, we're talking about Saudi Arabian war crimes. We're not talking about women's basketball. We're talking about war crimes and ownership, league ownership. Like, it's kind of wild when you really think about the connections that are being drawn and the headlines and what is trending and the conversations that are happening around this sport, and how it is truly able to spark some of the most interesting, insightful conversations that you could have. And, it's kind of being used as a catalyst for that. And I think that just honestly speaks to the power of sports in general, and the power that athletes themselves, but, the organization as a whole also has. The second thing we're going to be talking about today is why is it important to discuss women's basketball separate from men's basketball. So we're talking about basketball here, right? So basketball is basketball. All right, basketball is basketball. If you're a man playing it, a woman playing it, it's the same ball. Well, actually, it's a different size ball. But, it's the same sport. But is it really the same sport? I mean, obviously, like literally, we're talking about the same sport. We're talking about basketball. Like, I play basketball. I'm a basketball player. Like, yes, no matter if you're a man or a woman, that is true. But when we start seeing how the game is played and the actual differences that there are within the game, so the different sized ball, some of the different rules, some of the timing differences, how we don't have halves, we have quarters, and just how things are kind of structured a little bit differently. And then we look at the broadcast and how that's different, and how the media is totally different, the marketing for players is totally different. Is it really the same? And I guess my argument would be towards the side of no. I don't think that they're really that similar, other than the fact that you're still a basketball player. I think that to understand women's basketball is completely different than understanding men's basketball. And I do think that this is something that's very unique to basketball. All right, so now we're gonna switch it up a little bit, and I'm gonna give you some insight into how to finance your first film. So when was this? This was so not long ago that I should have this on the top of my head. Last February, I premiered my thesis film for my New York University Masters of Documentary Film program. And so I made a documentary short, we all had to, and mine was 22 minutes in length. And this was this was actually the second film that I ever made, but it was the first that I ever really publicized and brought to completion, in a sense. So I was very proud of it. And something that I realized as I was making it was, you have no money, you have no film. It doesn't matter if you have a script, how good the script is, how good your subject is, how good this is, that is, your camera person, whatever. You have no you have no money, you have no film. That's quoted by Spike Lee. You have no money, you have no film. So, given that is essentially the most important part of all of this. How are you financing your film? You have an idea, you have something that you want to create, something you want to do, something you've been thinking about. Well, how are you going to do it? Because you need to pay people. You at least need money to submit it to festivals. How do you do this? So the first thing that I did for my film, so here's a caveat, at NYU, we were given the camera. We were given all basic equipment, so tripod, mic, shotgun mic, clip-on mic, just, really basic stuff like that. So we had to get everything else if we wanted it. So there was things that I purchased. I filmed skateboarders, so I got some fisheye lenses. SD cards. You need editing software. Post-production is the most expensive of it all. I mean, I think I spent over $5,000, maybe. No, probably right around $5,000 in post-production. Okay, so how are you going to do this? So the first thing that I did was apply to grants. So you can find grants for first-time filmmakers, or, there's more prestigious grants, but I specifically went for student-affiliated, first-time filmmaker type grants. And I was lucky enough to apply to a grant that was for the first time available to NYU students, and it was Steph Curry's production company, Unanimous. So I pitched myself, I'm a basketball player, first and foremost, I'm a filmmaker, yes, but this is why you should choose me, because, it's Steph Curry, come on. So the whole production crew loved my pitch, everything, so I got the grant. The grant was $10,000. So, we're already given camera, we're already given all that. So what am I using this $10,000 for? So I had 2 camera people. I think in production, when I had an extra camera person, I needed to get them a camera. So those rentals, I could rent a Sony FX6 for maybe it might have been like $400 for like 2 weeks or something like that. So I would do that. So, because, FX6 is a great camera and I had 10,000. So, did that maybe 3 times for different sections of filming. So I had, a few different angles and things like that. And then I think in production, that was pretty much it. Like, I paid the camera people. And then, obviously, like, food and hospitality and things like that. I covered everything. The main expense that you're going to face when financing your film is in post-production. And a lot of people think, it doesn't cost that much. All you really need is a camera and a light and like good sound. You don't necessarily need a sound person though, especially to make a documentary. You should not have a sound person, honestly. You should have a very high quality shotgun mic. Unless you're doing like an interview or something where it's like you need it to be crystal clear. Because it could get in the way. Like documentary filming is very different than fiction filming. So, and it becomes relatively low budget to film in that way. It's documentary. Post-production, that's where you kind of get screwed over. Because then you need to pay your colorist, your sound designer. Composers we were paired with for free. They were students at the university. Then you need a mixer. You need to distribute. There's all these factors. If you get into a festival, well, can you go? Because it would be great if you could go, to potentially network and market this film. It doesn't just exist on your computer. This is an actual living, breathing film that people can access and people can engage with. So, I've made Instagram accounts, things like that. All that's free. But I think in total, the film cost $15,000. But, based on what I wanted in the film and who I needed to get to film what, because I needed a skateboarder to film some skateboarding scenes, so I had to pay them, and then I needed the proper camera for him to be able to hold it, and we did this like 4 times. It's like, yeah, like it's gonna end up adding up. So the other thing that I did in post-production to make up for some of this was I had to publicly fundraise. So I started a GoFundMe where I raised $2,000, just around $2,000, which was all for distribution. So, entering a film festival could run you $80 per, if you're going to do top film festivals. So I think my film's been selected for 10 or 11 so far, and I submitted to 40. So I've had about a 1 in 4 chance given every festival. That's actually better, I think. Those odds are better than what I've heard. I've heard of people, especially in my doc program, that have submitted to around 60, and they say that, they might have gotten into around the same amount. So, I submitted to very small festivals as well. So that's what some of this is also. A very local, very small festival, it's, going to get in more than likely. A festival that is related to women or people of color or people from a certain region or has to do with the subject. So mine's skateboarding, so a sports film festival, a skateboarding film festival, things like that. Those have really high chances. So that's why my number is higher. I wasn't just submitting to only the Sundances and stuff like that. It ranged. And so that really helped. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind when you're financing your first film is what are my starting expenses? More than likely it's going to be low, but to carry this project to completion, how much money am I going to need? I've heard from filmmakers in New York that film fiction, how much does it cost to film a very good quality, festival-worthy short, that they're going to tell you minimum 20. So fiction costs more because you need more crew there. For documentary, you could make a documentary that could get into Sundance, and you could do the whole thing. Like, I am being so serious. I don't wish I was joking. That's actually a great thing. But yeah, you could literally do the whole thing, minus post-production, because then you need like a composer and all these things. But no, like getting the footage, you could do the entire thing. For fiction, it needs more. And I would say a sweet spot could be like 10, 15 crew. I think if it's too small on a film set, I've never directed fiction, but I've worked on fiction film sets, small ones and large ones, independent and union. And I think that the small ones that I've worked on were extremely efficient. You can't have too small of a crew because you want things to work fast, and you want, multiple things need to happen at the same time to be able to set up lights and set different things up. So I would find a sweet spot of maybe like 10 people in total, to be there. But that is something that I also eventually do want to do. I want to direct a fiction film, probably connected to women's basketball, probably. But that's something I want to do more in the future as I kind of build out my brand right now and get some things rolling. So yeah, that's a bunch about, I don't know if I actually really answered my question, how do you finance your first film? But that's in general like kind of how I approached my film, at least, my NYU thesis. And my next film that I financed, the one that I'm actually working on right now, my personal documentary, is completely different from that. Completely different. Zero money upfront. I mean, I'm like 2.5 going on 3 years into filming. And it's one of those things where I don't even have a proper camera to film on. It's a photo camera, but I'm still filming on it. But that's part of the story. That's going to end up being a part of the story. So I would say also lean into where you are. For fiction or documentary, whatever resources you have, that could be like a very layered like idea in the film. Like, whoa, like, okay, I graduated NYU, I had access to cameras, but then, I'm not there anymore, I didn't. So this is like adding context. Like, for 2.5 years, I filmed on this camera. And it's kind of interesting, and I don't plan to finish the documentary, finish filming on this camera right now that I'm using right now to film this, but this is where I'm at right now. So, think about the ways that you can lean into your resources. And it's not a barrier. If you have access to something, lean into it. Whatever it is, it tells a story. It's all information. I'm going to hold on this getting into college interest from coaches and stuff for next episode. I'm going to leave it right there. So thank you for watching this episode, my first episode of this new-ish series, Tap In Tuesdays. And I will see you next week. This is coffee, by the way. It's pretty good.